Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Claudia and I'm the Executive Director of Wikimedia Austria. That's the local chapter of the Wikimedia Foundation here in Austria. And what we do is we promote free knowledge in general and support the communities of Wikipedia and its sister projects in Austria in particular. The content of my talk is probably a little bit different from a lot of things you heard before because I'm not talking about anything that has to do with technology, although we are an online community. So what I'm talking about is not so much about the technology that enables collaboration, but how to engage with the people we want to collaborate on these platforms, because this is mainly what we do in our chapter. Because if we're talking about Wikipedia, we're not so much talking about a website, we talk about a community, because really what makes Wikipedia so special and unique is not so much its size or structure, but the passion and enthusiasm of thousands of volunteers in the whole world that built this amazing encyclopedia. So what makes it special and what we should focus on is sustaining this community, or to be even more precise, the communities, because it's not like one big homogeneous community. It's actually made up of a lot of different communities, and although we regard ourselves as one big family, it's made up of a lot of different, even Wikipedia itself is made up of a lot of different language versions that all have their own culture and needs and ways of collaborating and structuring their work. And the same is true for a lot of other projects that we also do in the Wikiverse that are closely related to it. And yeah, as I said, although we're all a big family, there are differences, and there's not a one size fits all kind of recipe how to engage with this community. So that's something you have to be aware of when you talk about Wikimedia communities. Another question we have to ask ourselves is what actually is a community, because community has become a very en vogue kind of term. Everybody is engaging with communities nowadays. Public administration, every company, everybody is building communities, engaging communities, using communities, defining themselves as communities, but not always, if we use the term community, we actually mean the same thing. And to cite the co-founder of Wikipedia here, what we regard as a community is actually not just a cheap labor force, but a group of people that all have their passions and hopes and dreams that motivate them to engage into certain endeavor. And our job as a chapter, or as any kind of organization that claims to work with communities, is actually to help them to do what they want to do and enable and empower them, and not just extract the labor. So if it's all about the passion of Wikimedians that makes our project so successful, we as a chapter have to ask ourselves, how do we keep this passion alive, and what can we do to enable and motivate our volunteers to do what they so passionately want to do. The approach we usually take in this regard when we design projects or collaborations with institutional partners is what I would like to call, or we would like to call, and usually call, as community sourcing. And to understand the concept of community sourcing, or to explain it, it's usually the easiest to describe it in contrast to crowdsourcing, which is also like a very omnipresent term used in many different contexts, but not always quite precisely, because a crowd necessarily doesn't have to interact with each other a lot. So it's more about a passive way, a passive contributory model, like tagging, voting, or donating, that focuses more on the result of something than on the process itself. Whereas community sourcing is more like a collaborative approach that makes up more complex tasks and aims at more complex tasks, and also needs a more committed, loyal community behind it. And actually it's not so much about a result or product, it's more about the process behind it. So Wikipedia itself is actually like I would say, one of the finest examples for community sourcing, because it's not so much about having a comprehensive, finished encyclopedia by the end of 2020. It's more about the process and passion of gathering the sum of all human knowledge. That's what it's about. And that's what, like, this is also the approach we choose to apply to our project. To make that concept a bit more tangible, I want to talk about a specific project that we've been running for a couple of years, not only in Austria, but on an international level. And that actually is a very good example for it, because it not only kind of demonstrates how we as a chapter work together with our volunteers, but also how we work together with third parties and institutions, in this case in Austria with the Federal Monuments Office, which is usually a very crucial part in these projects, because these institutions and organizations often have a different culture from the culture that, like, we have in our project with our volunteers. So especially for us as a chapter, that's usually a challenge to be like the kind of link between like a classical organization with their hierarchies and ways of collaborating and our online communities. And we kind of like act as an interpreter in this way. And after all these years, we actually can come up with like some rules of engagement that I want to talk about later, that are actually like make it more easy to set up these projects, because it gives you like some guidelines on what you have to take into account if you do projects in such a setup. So Wiki Loves Monuments is a global photo contest for monuments, because cultural heritage in general is like one of the most important topics that we gather and disseminate on Wikipedia. So it's actually not surprising that this is one of the most successful projects, not only in Austria, but in the international movement, because monuments and cultural heritage is always something that people can relate to. It's something we see in our everyday lives. In the wake of such a contest, you actually realize that there are monuments in your neighborhood, like in your street, that you haven't paid much attention so far, and it also kind of enhances like some kind of national identity that all these people have, and that's why this is usually a topic that makes it easy to get people passionate and motivated about. Wiki Loves Monuments started off in Europe, in the Netherlands, then became a European photo contest, and since 2012 it's a global photo contest, and it's been even the biggest photo contest in the world according to the Guinness Book of Records for 2 years in a row. So this shows a bit the level the project has taken on. By and large, and this is also where the collaboration with institutional partners starts. Where Wiki Loves Monuments started from was like that volunteers went to institution and asked them for official data on monuments, so that they could put these information and data into lists for Wikipedia, use it in the wake of the photo contests, refine it, and in the end of the contests you could give back, like, or play back an updated, refined list of this data together with illustrations that was free to use for the institution. So this was kind of a win-win situation that made it easy to get a cooperation started between the various players on a national and regional context in the different countries. That's also what we did in Austria. We went to the Federal Monuments Office, asked them for the data for the list, and this resulted actually like in a way bigger kind of cooperation. So what started off with the list actually is now a long-standing cooperation that we had for over 4 years, that not only involves putting back and forward data every year, but also resulted in like a co-organizing of this international photo competition in Austria. We are hosting the award ceremony together. Both parties sponsor prizes. We do special features around the Heritage Days. So this became a way closer cooperation over the years. It also resulted in us having a what we call Wikipedian in residence in the Federal Monuments Office, who's working with two large-scale book scanners in order to digitalize the 19th century holdings of the Federal Monuments Library, and which is also made available on Wikimedia Commons in this process. So this is also something that is quite unique in Austria, that didn't happen in every other country, that from that first encounter where we just asked for data, actually we're now at a level where the Federal Monuments Office regards us as one of their most important collaboration partners. And it was also a huge boost for our Austrian community, because the level on quality and also frequency of interaction online and offline was just boosted and grew over the years and is still growing. So what did we do to actually come to this point, and what is important if you do similar projects in order to motivate your community, and also to make very clear to your external partners under what condition collaboration is possible and not, so that in the end all partners are happy and it's a real win-win situation. First and foremost, you need content to engage with. Coming back to the passion momentum, it has to be something that people get enthusiastic about. In our case, it was like cultural heritage and Austrian monuments. It's important to have a certain level of community participation in the whole project management life cycle, so that in the planning, conducting, and evaluation of the process, it's not only the institutional partner doing all this, but it's actually like a kind of cooperation between the chapter, the institutional partner, and also the people you want to do the job afterwards, which is Wikimedians, Wikipedians, photographers on Wikimedia Commons. Everybody who wants to take part in the process should also be invited to the table when you talk about this project. It's also about access to expertise. So as I said, it's not only about the exchange of data, it's also about an exchange of expertise. So what we also do is having behind the scenes tours in the Federal Monuments Office or other historical sites where experts explain things to our community, but are also open-minded enough to encounter them on eye level and also see them as experts in their way. So it's a dialogue. It's not so much a presentation of like what these monuments experts have to say to us, but it's like a kind of deliberation on these topics that actually also leads to enriched content for our projects, and is also a precious feedback to the institutional partners. Goes very much in the same direction. It's community participation. So you must create an environment where the community actually feels empowered to participate in the project and have a sense of ownership, so that coming back to Jimmy Wales' definition of a community, it's not just a cheap labor force. They really must have the feeling that this is actually their project and they're not just an asset in it. Again, it's also about the process and not so much the product. That's also something that has to be made very clear to your institutional partners, that although the product and result is really important, it's also about building the community. So this is also an aim that has to be celebrated and appreciated. So it's not so much getting things done and goodbye, that was it. If they really want to do that, then building a community and the interaction with the community is also a part of the targets and aims, and not just a means, a way to achieve a mean. And last but not least, evidence of collaboration. It's very important also through all stages of the project that it's very clear that the community has played a major role in all that. That relates to press releases, any kind of presentations you give on conferences on your projects, that you do it together, that people have a say and people also can present themselves. So what we also make very sure anytime we do, I don't know, information material with our partners is that it's like not only the head of department of the Federal Monuments Office and some person from our chapter that are like in this brochure with a picture, but making sure that it's like communicated that it's like a whole group of people, that's the whole community that actually contributed to that success. So nobody feels left out or hidden behind one or two representatives. Yeah, that was pretty much it. Any questions?
Thank you very much.